Hello and welcome. Welcome to SSUC, Spiritual Seekers United in Community. Welcome to our spiritual gathering for Sunday, October the 31st, 2021. We are so glad that you're joining us wherever you happen to be, in your homes today and through the week. We welcome, of course, as we do always at SSUC, we welcome the entire human family. All ages, all colors, all sizes, all cultures, all genders, all sexualities, all abilities, all religions, or none at all traditions, all people. What unites us, of course, is our desire to create community where we all belong. And we're doing that right now with each other in this room. We're doing it with each other across the kilometers as we gather with each other online. We acknowledge that here on this part of the prairies, we're located in Treaty 6 territory, where we commit to respecting the history and languages and culture of the First Nations and Métis people. As we honor this relationship, we know that we're growing in our ability to listen, that we are trying to learn as we journey our commitment to reconciliation together. So we ask that you also acknowledge, wherever you happen to be, the land and its history in the place where you are. Along with my teammate Nancy Steves, we welcome and bring to you this gathering thanks to many people, to Deb on the piano bringing us music this morning, and to our three vocalists, to Pam and to Blair, and to two people in the booth bringing us all of this technical video and audio. Thank you, Andrea and Noah. So we welcome you to this third week in our series called Finding Our Footing: Obstacles and Opportunities of Change. Today, in the Christian tradition, marks the Sunday where we celebrate All Saints Sunday. It's a way for us to ponder those who have gone before us, those who have died, our loves and our losses in our life. And it's a chance to focus on this aspect of change in our series, the grief of all the changes we experience. And so as we light our candle today, I invite you to light a candle at home and recognize that the light that we share as community extends beyond the boundaries of what we would consider life and death. Our community includes those who continue to shine their light with us and around us, within us. Our community honors and celebrates the community of all saints that continue to speak to us in wisdom and in legacy. And so on this day of All Saints Sunday, we light this light. We celebrate that we share it together as community and that we are one community with many, many values to live for. Let's sing together.
Deep living has us cultivate, vibrant dream to renew, a meaning and a purpose and adventure to explore, to reach out to one another and to share in life's embrace, to see in every person risen through the years, to great or living, dying with serenity and hope, affirming we're related to each other, one and all. We live and work while hoping that we will lifelong give. Not objects, money, trappings, ideals that long persist, or love or joy or character, our purpose to fulfill will be our lasting legacy, a vision of goodwill.
Good morning. We're going to share a little wisdom in our time for all ages from a piece of children's literature, a book entitled The Heart and the Bottle. These are the words of Oliver Jeffreys, a bit of teaching about how we make friends with the empty places in our lives. Once there was a girl, much like any other, whose head was filled with all the curiosities of the world, with thoughts of the stars, with wonder at the sea. She took delight in finding new things, until the day she found an empty chair. Feeling unsure, the girl thought the best thing was to put her heart in a safe place, just for the time being. So she put it in a bottle and hung it around her neck. And that seemed to fix things at first. Although in truth, nothing was the same. She forgot about the stars and stopped taking notice of the sea. She was no longer filled with all the curiosities of the world and didn't take much notice of anything, other than how heavy and awkward the bottle had become. But at least her heart was safe. It might never have occurred to the girl what to do had she not met someone smaller and still curious about the world. There was a time when the girl would have known how to answer her, but not now, not without her heart. And it was right at that moment she decided to get it back out of the bottle, but didn't know how. She couldn't remember. And nothing seemed to work. The bottle couldn't be broken. It just bounced and rolled right down to the sea. But there, it occurred to her, someone smaller and still curious about the world, she might know a way. And it just so happened she did. The heart was put back where it came from. And the chair wasn't so empty anymore, but the bottle was. In these words, in the wisdom of children's literature, there may we find wisdom for our living. From the poet Mark Nepo, an excerpt from his book entitled Finding Inner Courage. These words. Over the years, I have been broken of my stubbornness into accepting a great many things. Everywhere we turn, there's a need for some form of acceptance. For loss is not alterable. No matter what we try to say, we can't restore what was lost or mask the feelings of grief that it engenders. So the gateway to meaning is not in avoiding loss or getting over loss, but in an effort to accept what is, keeping our hearts open. In Europe in the 1800s, those who had lost someone wore a black band on their arm to let everyone know they were grieving. It was refreshing that this made grief public and communal. Custom was that you would do this for a year. The implication, however, was that by the end of that first year of living without the one you lost, you should have sufficiently grieved and moved on. But ultimately, we live through things and with things. We don't get over things. In truth, grief rings like an echo that doesn't stop and thins to a frequency below the normal hearing of those who have not yet grieved. The truth is, as long as we believe the goal is to get over things, we'll lack the inner skills of living with such things. And all the while, grief, loss, keep thinning till they sound under our breath, in the skin of our ear and the muscle of our heart. Our obsession with avoiding grief is the major obstacle to experiencing true freedom of the heart. At the same time, grief is the chief practice ground for acceptance. Such acceptance, not on an intellectual level, but in the belly of our days. Such acceptance is a way to kneel by the endless stream that runs through our lives. Whether we drop to our knees or are brought to our knees, drinking from that stream is what makes us wholehearted. In this lived wisdom, may we find wisdom for our living.
Starting out with a premise this morning that all change is loss, and that loss requires grief. It's been noted that people don't resist change, they resist loss. Whether change is due to death, a difficult change, or the best of circumstances, change requires us to lose something, a dear one, a routine, a relationship, colleagues, familiarity, a place that holds memories, convenience, a known experience. So any change is loss, and loss requires grief. And it's one of those topics we don't learn about unless we have to, or until we have to. Why would we? If things are going great, if we're well and all around us is well, we don't need to think too much about grief and loss. But what that means is that when we do come face to face with losing something or someone, we are generally, most of us, unprepared. We're launched into loss and grief without preparation. Now, the longer we're on life's journey, the more we do it, and we do learn on the job. But no matter our stage in life, we will encounter it as sure as anything. We will experience change. And so we will have to deal with our loss and the grief it brings. As Mark Nepo writes, the gateway to meaning is not in avoiding it or getting over it, but in the effort to accept what is while keeping our hearts open. It's in that spirit of acceptance that we can acknowledge that we are living in a time of much change and much loss. For some, it's the literal loss of life that we are grieving, loved ones who have died. For others, it is the loss of security or a sense of control. Perhaps it is isolation and the grief of being cut off from familiar routines and community. The loss of normalcy, the fear of economic toll on us, the loss of connection. There are many changes and losses. And it's hitting us, and we are grieving collectively. Even with one eye on the future and what ifs and possibilities, there is still a kind of collective grief in the air, and we acknowledge it. David Kessler wrote in the Harvard Business Review lately something that also helps us to acknowledge something important. He writes about anticipatory grief. Anticipatory grief is about losing something we always imagined in the future. This happens with the death of a loved one, but it happens in many other ways as well. We don't only grieve the past and what we don't have anymore. We also grieve a lost future, a future that we imagined. So at any point in time, there are two kinds of grief going on: a sense of loss for what was, and a kind of unknowing of what might be. There is the reality of the grief of change that we're all experiencing, each one of us. There's a story in our tradition that has some valuable wisdom about grief that I'd like to share. It's a story about a group of Jesus' closest friends: Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Jesus had learned that his friend Lazarus is ill. Now, when he learns this news, he's still far away from Bethany, where they live. And he heads there, and he heads to Bethany, and Jesus is literally walking towards death. He doesn't yet know the state of the situation in Bethany with Lazarus, but he's walking toward the imminent death of his friend. And when Jesus arrives there, he enters a scene of grief and loss. Lazarus has died in the days before he arrived. So by the time he gets there, his friend has died. And Mary and Martha approach him. He's still outside of town, and Mary and Martha come running. And they say these words: "If you had been here, my brother would not have died." I wonder if that sentiment sounds familiar to us. If only this or the other had happened, we could have avoided this tragedy. And then the story goes on, and we hear those around that family say, because they knew of Jesus' reputation, and they said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of a blind man also have kept this man, his friend, from dying?" This question reflects a well-worn tradition in the spiritual life. The writings of prayers and psalms are full of crying out. They're full of complaint. And in the world of this story, space is given for that. All the people around Mary and Martha and Lazarus are given space, and they're expressing their lament, their grief, their if-onlys, their bargaining, their anger, their complaint. And I think so many of us know through the real lived testament of our lives that there is no simple answer to the cry of why. There are no pat answers, no answers that can ever adequately answer our questions about why. No matter what our theological perspective, nothing satisfies our need to make sense of death, of tragedy, of loss. There are no words. This story has one response to those questions, and it isn't with words, it's with actions. A friend arrives on the scene in Bethany and enters into the grief of Lazarus' family. So much so that when Jesus sees the people of Lazarus' community gathered around weeping, he's deeply troubled. When Mary and Martha take him to the tomb where they laid Lazarus, he begins to weep with them. This is a story of a friend present to it all. One not afraid to express compassion and deep feeling to the ones he loves. And if there's any answer to grief, it's this one: the comforting arms, the shared tears of friends and family. Now, the story goes on from there to tell of Jesus removing the stone from Lazarus' tomb and calling him to get up and come out, to rise from the dead and to live. Maybe I don't have to say this, but we need to remember that we read these stories metaphorically with an end toward the wisdom that they have to offer. And so in the sequence of this story, how can we ignore the fact that this process of a Lazarus coming alive again comes only after the shared grief and after the tears and after the anger and after the connection and the friendship that happens in that little town of Bethany? This story's wisdom is telling us that with great and deep compassion, one is able to find life among the grief. With care and empathy, any one of us is able to persevere through the changes and the losses and find that what we have lost still lives in us, lives through us. It's wisdom walking among us as though out of a tomb. There is and will be reason to look up, to face life, to face a future, and build it together again. If we accept the premise that I started with, that change is loss and loss requires grief, then we must also presume that everyone is always grieving about something. If we make this assumption in our encounters with each and every person, we are more likely to pay attention to the grieving that is surely going on within all of us, within the person across from us, within every person we meet. And because of that, well, maybe we're likely to change some of our approaches to the people in our lives. Because of that, maybe we're likely to change some of the conclusions we make about other people and their choices and their behavior. When we orient ourselves to the role of grief and the work we're all doing to embrace it, to carry it, to integrate it, we're going to find ourselves becoming less judgmental of one another, more understanding, more able to use our own grief as a way to enter into others, to weep with another, to be searchers together in finding the life in the midst of the change and the loss that we're all experiencing. The title of our series is Finding Our Footing. But the subtitle is Obstacles and Opportunities of Change. We recognize that this All Saints Sunday is a day for pondering the opportunities and obstacles in the grief we carry among all the changes. We are all grieving. We have the opportunity to name our losses. It's hard to voice our grief and to validate our pain, but that is what we have the opportunity to do. To refuse to deny it. That as much as it hurts our heart, that we refuse to stuff it in a bottle. But we'll do the hard work of carrying and sharing the losses we bear with even one person, but especially in community. The obstacle is before us of allowing ourselves to feel and validate our pain, sadness that's uncomfortable, a deep sorrow that can be scary, and the challenge before us of our healing journey that comes through our emotions, not despite our emotions, but through them. We have the obstacle, too, of recognizing that our grief is not linear or predictable. And gosh, does that ever mean that we're surprised, that we're blindsided by it, doesn't it? It strikes us when we're most vulnerable. We embrace the challenge that grief doesn't go in a straight line, and that's okay. That there's no checklist, there's no schedule for grief, and that we're challenged to avoid judging our own grieving process against someone else's. They look like they're doing fine. Why can't I be? Or judging someone else's against our own. And maybe this is in part why we honor this day every year. That we circle back. We know that grief isn't once and done. That we recognize that our losses and the grief we have isn't something to fix. It is something to carry. And we have the opportunity, of ritual. As we ponder the changes in our lives, what do we need? Do we need to journal about the significance of our loss? Do we need to create a photo book? Do we need to have a conversation with someone that's important? Do we need to visit a place of significance? Do we need a day like today where we name our losses and the people we love? Do we need a Blue Christmas gathering? Do we need some way that we haven't thought of yet to help each other find rituals that help us? Whatever it is, We close as we began. Change is loss, and loss requires grief. Mark Nepo reminds us that as long as we believe the goal is to get over things, we'll lack the inner skill of living with such things. May we continue letting our hearts out of its bottle, living wholeheartedly, relying on each other, kneeling by the endless stream that runs through all of life, and not being afraid to drink from it. May it be so for us in so many ways.
We bring our prayers on this All Saints Sunday, and we invite you in the place where you are to pause in a spirit of prayer with us as we name those who have lit the path before us. In the miracle and mystery of life, we pause as the grateful ones, the ordinary miracles, the stargazers, the dreamers, co-creators of meaning and change. In this moment, we create a space for more gratitude, greater compassion, sensitive understanding and honesty. We share gratitude to be alive, to give and receive love, and share all that can humanize and connect.
How great that we are stirred as a species to stories and song, and that a spirit of resilience lives within us as we help each other heal our hurts, remember with gratitude, and go about the difficult work of transforming anguish into wisdom, pain into beauty, failure into freedom, guilt into understanding.
We enter now into a ritual where we can honestly and openly grieve the changes losses and loves of our lives. We affirm that those who have died are not gone from us. They live on in our hearts, our actions, our spirits, our memories are living. We remember these beloved ones with deep gratitude. As each series of names are read, we'll share words you see on your screen in which we welcome you to place your voice with ours in these words: "You who light the path before us, we receive your light." As we honor these, our ancestors, you who light the path before us, we receive your light.
Louise and Ronald Adams, Wendy Adams, Lorna Allen, Margaret Ann Armour, Brian, Kevin, and Rick Barkwell, Noreen Blackerman, Andrea Brodeur, Peggy Bryden, Alvin and Mona Buckles, Joan Caruso, Sharon Costel, Janice Kramer. You who light the path before us, we receive your light.
Jane Cumming, Cameron Cunningham, Tony Darts, George Deschamps, Baran DeLong, Dennis Dubé, Trevor Dykman, Joy Faust, Eleanor Fisher, Phyllis Fowler, Nancy Gordon, William Harris. You who light the path before us, we receive your light.
Karen Ann Harvey, Sharon and Max Hendry, Bob Hetherington, Neil Hibbard, Charles and Fern Hickman, Margaret Hickmott, Barbara and Larry Hurl, Wilda Hurst, Arnie Johnson, Bob and Jean Jordan, Shirley Junk. You who light the path before us, we receive your light.
Bill Kennedy, Andrew King, Jean Kabilka, Ken Kabilka, Enid Kuhn, Dennis Lane, Pat Larson, George Larson, Anna Lee, Lydia Davidiak, Beryl Lebrow, Doris Mackay, Jack McCracken, Anna McDonald, Robert McDonald. You who light the path before us, we receive your light.
Jan McElhaney, Gordon McFadden, Katie Mitchell, Anne Morton, Christopher Nielsen, Margaret Nethercutt, Bob O'Hara, Michael O'Hay, Lori Odson, Ronald Oko, Jean Ollenberger, Amelia Osby, Jean Osby. You who light the path before us, we receive your light.
Jim Patton, Joyce Patton, Malcolm Pace, Mary Peterson, Joan Phillips, John Powell, John Ramatar, Leota Rash, Tom Rash, Margaret Redshaw, Harold Sager, Hazel Sawyer, Jeffrey Schweitzer, Raymond Sagan. You who light the path before us, we receive your light.
Harold Shepard, Edna Shirk, Harry Shirk, John Smearer, Veta Smearer, Ken Smith, Margaret Smith, Ruth Spears, Wendy Spears, Joseph Stebbing, Alberta Stevenson, Ted Stevenson, Gerald Steves, Verna Steves, Rob Swanson, Randy Taves. You who light the path before us, we receive your light.
Laurie Simonson, Jeannie Thompson, Millie Waring, Richard Waring, Ken Williamson, Iva Wood, John Wood, Michael Warren, Thelma Warren, Cameron Wright, Barb Wright, Dennis Young, David Zingle. You who light the path before us, we receive your light.
Now, in this moment, we leave some silence for you to speak names that have not yet been spoken, losses you've experienced, loves you grieve. You who light the path before us, we receive your light.
In the shadows of all that has gone before us, may we remember the light of all who continue to shine The significance of those who have died lives on. Their legacy burns brightly within us. May our hearts stay open to an ever-expanding future, even in the midst of changes and challenges. May it be so. May it ever be so. Amen.
An invitation to all that are joining us now, live. We will have a post-gathering Zoom call to have some reflections, to ponder what we heard today and how that has resonated with us, and as has been our most recent custom, we'll share some prayers of joy and of sadness as well together as an online community. So get the link at the website you see on your screen or in your morning messenger, and join us in about 15 or 20 minutes or so at about 11:15 Mountain Time. With change being a constant and change requiring grief, our grief too is a lifelong companion. So may we learn together to sing through our tears and dance through our pain, knowing that the light of life continues to shine in us and around us all. May we take the light and live it and shine it wherever it needs to be today and through the week. May we be well, and until we meet again as community, take care.